Today I want to bring your attention to something that's been quietly unfolding in the property market. Something most people haven't noticed or talked about enough. Hi everyone, I'm Charlene. Welcome back to my channel. It's the price gap between CCR, RCR and OCR and how it's been narrowing. To get us on the same page, let's define the regions quickly. CCR is the core central region, so think Orchard, Tanglin, Newton, River Valley, the traditional prime areas. RCR, the rest of central region, places like Queenstown, Toa Payoh, Marine Parade close to town but not considered the core. OCR, the outside central region, these are the heartland areas like Punggol, Sengkang, Woodland, Tampines. So now historically, the price difference between CCR, OCR and RCR was clear. CCR is definitely the premium, but now before buying into any properties, we need to look at the data and trends from the past years and compare to now to understand what is happening with the region. So here, let's take a look at the data to understand how the different regions are performing. We will go through numbers together slide by slide to let me further illustrate to you. Now let's compare 99 years leasehold from the one-bedroom units between CCR, RCR and OCR. So the price gap was very clear. CCR versus OCR is about 88.9% and CCR versus RCR is 41%. So now fast forward to 2024. Now between CCR versus OCR, the gap right now is at 32%. CCR versus RCR, the gap has been shrunk to 10%. So this is a massive narrow compression, especially between the CCR versus the RCR, which is over here. So buyers are now paying nearly the same per square foot for a 99-year leasehold in RCR as they would in CCR. So for buyers today, the difference between paying for a CCR one-bedroom unit versus one in OCR is no longer as significant as it used to be, especially when you factor in location, prestige and rental strength. Now let's look at two-bedroom. In 2014, CCR versus OCR, the price gap is at 82%. Okay, while CCR versus RCR, the price gap is at 37%. Now let's look at 2024. Between CCR versus OCR, the gap is at 23%. And then CCR versus RCR is only at 8.82%. So this is especially significant for buyers considering mid-size units either for own stay or investment because the gap between RCR and CCR is now less than 9%. So if your budget stretches to 2,600 per square foot in RCR, it may be worth asking whether CCR offers better long-term value. Next, let's look at 3-bedroom. So CCR versus OCR gap was a massive 120%. Okay, whereas CCR versus RCR is at 73%. And now, fast forward to 2024 again. CCR versus OCR is at 34%, whereas CCR versus RCR is at 11.6%. Again, the gap between CCR and RCR has compressed the most. So if you are looking for a larger unit, only the price difference is only 10% to move into a more prestigious central district with a long-term demand that should prompt a closer look at what CCR has to offer. So here's the big picture. From 2014 to 2024, we have seen the CCR versus OCR gap shrink by more than half. The CCR versus RCR gap shrink even more in some cases to under 10%. So across all unit types, the price difference between CCR and RCR is no longer as significant as before. And in many cases, RCR buyers are paying close to CCR rates. This doesn't mean CCR is always the better choice, but it does mean buyers should no longer assume that RCR or OCR are automatically more affordable or more worth it. So this data show it's time to compare smart, not by default. So now we also have to look at the leasehold, especially when we talk about what is the price gap between a freehold and versus 99 years lease. One-bedroom units versus the region. So this is a huge gap of 77%. 34.8% between CCR and RCR. And then 2024, the gap has now shrunk for, if you compare OCR is 45% and RCR now is shrink to 24%. This shows buyers are now paying almost the same per square foot in RCR or OCR for leasehold as they would for a freehold unit in CCR. Now let's look at 2-bedroom units, which are typically the sweet spot for both investors and own-stay buyers. So the premium gap between freehold CCR versus OCR was 90% and versus RCR 99 is 43%. Now, 2024, look at the gap now. It has narrowed for OCR at 38% and RCR at 22%. So what does this mean? The once massive gap between CCR freehold and leasehold has narrowed more than half. Buyers who used to think freehold CCR was too premium now see it only more than 20% higher than a 99 years RCR unit. So that's a big shift. Let's move to 3 bedrooms. This is a 92% gap versus OCR and 51% versus RCR. In 2024, OCR is only 28% gap and only 11% gap for RCR. This is a significant difference for RCR versus CCR freehold premium because it has narrowed from 50% to just over 11%. So if you are buying a 3-bedroom for family use or legacy planning, that 11% might feel like a small price for a freehold title in a prime district, especially compared to a leasehold in RCR with a similar quantum. So let's wrap this segment with the bigger picture from 2014 to 2024. The freehold CCR versus leasehold RCR or OCR price gap has shrunk across all unit types. Freehold is no longer priced at luxury levels. Buyers who previously excluded CCR freehold due to budget may now find it accessible. The decision between leasehold and freehold now comes down to long-term goals, not just per square foot. And that's the opportunity buyers today need to be aware of. The question becomes, are you still avoiding CCR because you think is expensive, or have you actually compared the price per square foot gap today? Understanding the price gap is important, but how do we look at buying safe in this current market? So now, let's give a case study. We'll bring you back to July 2017. So this is Martin Modern, which is launched by Guaco Land. It had a total of 450 units. On the first day, only 90 units were sold. Now some people might have looked at that and panicked. Only 20% sold, maybe not a good sign. But look at what happened after. Buyers who took action during the first phase entered at a per square foot at around 2,100 to 2,400 per square foot. Fast forward to just 1 year later, buyers were paying over 2,900 per square foot for similar stacks and layouts. So this is a big gap of over 400,000 for the same unit type, all within just 12 months. And take a look at 3-bedroom units here. Some buyers enter at even as low as 2,000 per square foot, while others just over a year later enter at 2,748 per square foot for the exact same stack and same size. This is a massive difference of $771,000. This is what I mean by buying safe. It's not about timing the bottom, it's about entering before pricing momentum locks you out. So when we track the full price history of Martin Modern, the pattern is clear. Those who took action in the first initial stage, when fear and hesitation were high, benefited from the upside in the following quarters. Once the market realized the value of the project and the sales picked up, the average per square foot stayed consistently between above 2,600 and to 2,700 per square foot. So if you are looking at a CCR or RCR unit today and wondering whether it is the right time, the better question might be, is this the safe zone to enter before prices push up again? Because in every cycle, the ones who buy safely are the ones who enter when pricing is still flat. And understanding unit level differences and choosing the right project before demands gets priced in. Buy safe is about catching value, not chasing hype. And finally, this brings us to what's ahead. This map shows the expected new launch pricing for 2025 to 2026. And it's clear, OCR and RCR are heading for record new benchmarks. Let's just take a few examples. Bayshore in the OCR projected about 2,600 per square foot. Zion Road, which is in the RCR, is expected to be about 2,700 2,800 per square foot. Marina Gardens Lane is about 2,900 per square foot. It is in the RCR. But the real question is, does this narrowing price gap trend continue forever? The answer is not necessarily. Markets move in cycles. What we are seeing now is a temporary window where the price gap has narrowed because CCR has remained relatively stable while RCR and OCR prices increased due to high land bids, rising construction costs, and strong new launch demand. But this gap may not last. Once new launches in CCR resume, especially those with high land costs, we could see CCR per square foot jump again, potentially widening the gap once more. This is why it's important to track not just prices, but the pace and direction of change. So what this trend is really telling us is alert to moments where fundamentals and price temporarily disconnect, because that's often when the best entry opportunities lie. And the narrowing gap we're seeing now, that might just be one of those signs. As we wrap up, let's talk about why the next 90 days might be an important window to pay attention to. What you're seeing on screen are just some of the upcoming CCR and City Fringe launches. Projects like Upper House at Orchard Boulevard, Promenade Peak, Robertson Opus, River Green, all located in CCR and RCR area and most expected to launch at new pricing benchmark. Now, this doesn't mean there's pressure to act within a fixed time frame, but what it does mean is that this market is shifting into its next phase, where land costs and launch pricing are expected to move upward, especially in CCR. Based on the past pattern like we saw with Martin Modern, early phases of launch tend to offer the widest price range and most room to compare rationally. That's it from me today. I hope this breakdown gives you a clearer picture of what's happening behind the scene and how to think about your next property move more calmly, with the numbers in mind. If not, reach out to me via my contact below for a chat over a coffee. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.